8. Just setting it up on YouTube. And I will okay. We are now live, so I'll turn it over to both of you. I'll take my camera off and we're good to go.
Hey, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. We have the honor of having Jerry Mellum speak to us tonight about TEFRA and what it provides for your child with disabilities. Jerry is a senior planning analyst with Hennepin County Human Services in the Public Health Department. He has received a service award from the Minnesota Department of Human Services and the Minnesota Board on Aging for exemplary service. He is a wonderful friend to Pacer Center and gives fabulous talks for us. He has worked with people with disabilities for over 30 years in many capacities, in group homes and day programs, programs for people with challenging behavior, and he was an advocate at ARC Minnesota for 8 years. Currently, he works with families and individuals to help them navigate he says sometimes complex, I think it's most often complex process for employment, housing, and consumer-directed options. He provides community and staff training on county services and is certified as a person-centered thinking trainer from the learning community on person-centered practices. So it's our great honor to welcome him this evening, to have him teach us about TEFRA and how to access it and what we can gain from it. Jerry, thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you, Linda. It's always great to work with you and to work with Pacer. I'm happy to be here tonight and really happy to share information that I know and I've learned through the years with families that need the information. So there's a lot of good things happening. First, commercial. You always have to have commercials, right? With information. And so Hennepin County has informational sessions that are available on various county topics that are in person and available through YouTube videos. There's a website there, hennepin.us/CMTY support. If you go there, there's more descriptions about these topics. So if you find those helpful, if you're not in Hennepin County, if you're in Minnesota, anywhere, you find those helpful, you can access those on YouTube videos or go in person to libraries that we schedule. What is TEFRA? We always have big words to teach people. You can go home and tell your neighbors I learned this and they'll be impressed. It stands for the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act. What does that mean? It means that historically Minnesota had developed this program that was originally tied to parental income. And so if you had limited income, you didn't have any parental copays. And if you had a larger income, you had maybe sometimes significant copays, and you had to decide if it was in your best interest to be on TEFRA to access medical assistance services or not. So relatively recently in the last legislative session, some really, really good things happened. And one of those good things was that the parental income criteria has been dropped. So they don't consider parental income anymore. You still apply for TEFRA like you did before, but they don't consider parental income. So that means anybody, any child that has a disability or is certified disabled or is on Social Security can now access medical assistance and the services we're going to talk about tonight. Eligibility is based on chronic medical condition, persistent medical illness, or developmental disability or related condition. So that's really, really good news. Other good news is that the state has a website that you can apply for various types of insurance, including medical assistance. And they've made it a little easier to apply. I looked at this today and the graphics are really easy to kind of follow. You go to the address and go to minsure.org, basically, and then find this page, apply and enroll. And there's 4 steps. Comparing the estimates, you're educating yourself, about the different types of insurance products available, gathering information, creating an account, which is pretty easy. And then finally enrolling. There's a couple of tabs that you can click on the bottom. You can click on I'm ready to apply now, or I'm looking for free help. So I was not ready to apply, so I clicked on the button, find free help. When I did that, this page came up. And so 3 boxes, create an account, sign in. So in order to use this website, you do have to create a basic account. And if you click on find free help, this page comes up, an assister directory. Very nice. They have MNsure certified brokers and navigators that provide free enrollment help through virtual meetings, phone appointments, and in-person meetings as well. You can select a navigator or a broker or both. And the really nice part, they have a whole list of various languages. So if your primary language is in English, you can access this support through an interpreter or through a native speaker as well. So it makes it easier to kind of access that service. So I hope you find that helpful. Services through medical assistance, since most services are paid through medical assistance, have different kind of criteria for access. Some services have waiting lists, and you would think that a line or a queue depends on when you applied for the service. If I got there early, I'm going to get the service earlier than someone else, but that's not really the case in most situations. It's based on your situation. So if you have an urgent need, if you have limited supports in addition to your natural supports, then you might have a higher priority, and you might be accessed first. Good news is that today we do not have a waiting list for home and community-based services. It doesn't mean that you don't wait a while to get it, but you don't have to wait 8 years like we had many years ago. There was a waiting list of 1,345 people in our county alone, and then, but now there's no waiting list. It doesn't mean that everybody gets that level of care or that home and community-based waiver, which we'll talk about more detailed in a minute. If you have unmet service needs beyond what medical assistance can provide, then you can meet that higher threshold. And so these lists, waiting lists, are based on county budgets or state set budgets. They're also based on how much money the state legislature allows us. So it's a good idea to share your stories with the state legislature so they're educated, they know about your situation, they know how challenging it can be sometimes. And then maybe that pool would be a little less deep. Other services are easier to access. An example is PCA, Personal Care Attendant services. If you meet that criteria, you can get those services relatively quickly. You have to be screened eligible based on your level of disability. And so these services measure kind of the level of support that you need. For PCA, it's about bathing, dressing, grooming, supports, and then they work within specific budgets amount. It's really important to educate yourself about the various services so that when services become available, you don't have to start learning about them. You'll know about them and you can kind of hit the ground running a little bit. That was really important when there was a waiting list for a waiver. People would wait a long time and all of a sudden we'd knock on the door and say, you have service availability. And they didn't know what they should do. They had to decide, they had to learn, but they only had about 60 days to decide before it went to the next person. So educate yourself and learn about the options. I want to excuse my coughing tonight. I was telling Linda earlier, I've had a cold for about a month and it just doesn't go away. So I've got a glass of water here and other kinds of things. And so I think I'll make it through it, but excuse my coughing. Some of the services that we have require county case management. Some of the services we're going to talk about tonight do not require county case management. You can access them directly from the provider of service, or you access them by going to the doctor and getting a prescription or a referral. So we're going to talk about all these services tonight. The services under the list of not needing a case manager and the services under the list of requiring a case manager. So just so you see them and hear them first, some of the services that do not require case management are services paid through straight medical assistance. Services you get from the doctor, the dentist, the chiropractor, the massage therapist, the specialist, the podiatrist, etc. Personal care attendant services, we're going to talk more about that for physical help, bathing, dressing, grooming, feeding, types of things. A unique self-directed service where you're the manager, you're the boss, called consumer support grant, where there's some options to be paid as a parent of a child less than 18, or to be paid as husband to provide care for their wife, or vice versa. You can access horseback riding therapy, art therapy, music therapy, prescribed special diets. Don't confuse that with another consumer-directed program through the waiver called consumer-directed community support, which we'll also be talking about. Some other services through straight medical assistance are adult rehabilitative mental health services for adults and children therapeutic support services for children. These are related to mental health needs, counseling, helping people to have make their appointments and help with problem solving. Some services that require county case management are family support grant, and then home and community-based services for people with developmental disabilities. These are different types of supports for different levels of care. So people with developmental disabilities currently today have one type of waiver. People with more physical needs or medical needs have community alternatives for disabled inclusion, the CADI waiver. People with hospital level of care have community alternative care or CAC waiver. People with a brain injury that generally occurred after age 21 have a brain injury waiver. And if you have aunts and uncles or grandchildren, grandparents, they might be accessing the elderly waiver or the alternative care program. This might be a good time to have any questions. If you have any questions so far.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One of them is somebody who notes that they've been quoted a 4 to 6 month waiting period for their MinChoices assessment. And they sent me a link to an article that says that that service is supposed to be provided within 20 days. I think they've changed that to be 20 days when it's assigned to a worker, to a social worker. But I know there's been an overwhelming response to parents who are seeking MinChoices assessments and to be in the system when they were previously left out because of the high parental fee that are now trying to get in. So if you want to
Right.
speak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a number of people that are accessing services now. In Hennepin County, I think it's taking 4 to 6 weeks, but you might have different personal experiences than that. We are hiring hundreds. This morning, I trained 36 people in housing. They're new applicants for us being assessors. And so we are training hundreds of new assessors. We have hundreds of new assessors. We're adding new units of assessment with new unit managers coming with that too. So very often we'll see, welcome to Hennepin County, this new unit manager, or welcome, or look at this open position. And so we're working really, really hard to keep up with the demand, but we can't just plug people in. It does take time to train people on the MinChoices assessment, which is very comprehensive and very standardized, provided through the state of Minnesota.
Okay, but the wait period is down to 4 to 6 weeks.
You know, I didn't check it today, but typically it's less than 6 months for sure in Hennepin County. If it gets to that case, we have other mechanisms where you can maybe make an urgent case, or you can call the contracted case manager liaison. And I can't speak for all counties in Minnesota, but waiting 6 months is too long. So you want to make some noise and bring it to somebody's attention and see what you can do to kind of get it moved up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, while you're waiting, we're going to talk about some of the services through straight medical assistance that don't require case management that you can try. You could use Family Support Grant first, up to age 23, I believe. You can use Consumer Support Grant after that, and that's birth to adults. And so those are some supports and services you can get relatively quickly without a min choices assessment. You might need to be on Social Security or be certified disabled, or maybe have a personal care attendant assessment, but you wouldn't require min choices assessment initially. So maybe you can use those services while you're waiting for other comprehensive services like the home and community-based waiver. That's just some advice, some things to think about.
And I have another question that refers to the 6-month wait for min choices. They say that their county won't make the referral for a SMRT. And so how can they work around that to get a SMRT referral?
Is it Hennepin County or is it another
It is
county?
not. It is not.
Yeah. Again, I can't really speak for other counties.
Okay.
In order to be certified disabled, there's 2 criteria. One, to be open to Social Security. So you could apply for Social Security and start that process. Once you are open to Social Security, you're in essence SMRTed, basically, because you've met that criteria. I just don't understand why they wouldn't make a referral, because it's not the county that does the SMRT process, it's the state of Minnesota. So
yeah, but it is my understanding that the state, or that the county, makes the referral to SMRT. Is that correct?
I think there's referral to the state, but they're not the ones that are doing it. So I'm not sure why they're not doing it. Okay. Things can be handled more on an individual basis. It's really hard to talk about everybody all the time, but it's easier to maybe talk about individuals. I'm happy to talk with people individually through email or whatever about their specific situation, if that's helpful.
Okay. Yes, the county does. I can type that one. The county does the min choices assessments. If you opt to be your loved one's PCA, do you still need a case manager?
You don't need a case manager for PCA. You can go right to the PCA provider and ask for an assessment from them. If you want to, it's one of the services we'll be talking about in more detail in a minute.
Okay. And somebody else who says they've been on the wait list for a min choices assessment for 3 months. We have asked for it to be expedited, but it hasn't. I mean, there's just a lot of demand and a lot of need out there. How can I escalate if I was quoted 4 to 6 months, not weeks, from Hennepin County?
Yes, you can appeal it. You can appeal a lot of things. You're appealing case management as a result. So if you Google Minnesota Department of Human Services appeals, there's a great page that comes up that provides a lot of information, and that might give you some other kind of power authority to move ahead.
Okay. And then this might be related to the first one. We have also contacted SSDI, but they said since he does not qualify for SSI, they won't do a medical evaluation.
Okay.
That's kind of, I think they need to contact you to talk through that one.
Could. Right. SSI is the typical service you're applying for income at age 18. SSDI has to do with parental work periods, and so sometimes there's an enhanced budget based on that. So
okay, I think that we should go on. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
These are the services through straight medical assistance. We're going to talk about a few of them, and most of these are ones you can apply for right away without a lot of waiting. If you're open to medical assistance already, it does take time to get open to medical assistance, so it's a process. Linda asked if we had some resources or handouts, and one thing I might offer to you in the future or later, after this session, we have a transition checklist, and that has a lot of important information in it about what to do first, second, third, and fourth if you have a child that's 14 to 21, and a lot of good contact information. It would apply to the state of Minnesota, not just Hennepin County, so I'll make that available. The Medical Assistance Directory, the Medical Assistance Guidebook, is 600 pages long. I haven't read all the pages, but I've got a few slides here which kind of highlight some of the services available through straight medical assistance. So many, the majority of all the services we're talking about today are paid through medical assistance. So it's really important to know about that and to get open to medical assistance as soon as you can if you need the supports and services. So the list includes doctors, occupational therapists, physical therapists, personal care attendant, hospital stays, glasses, and group homes called intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities. These are some of the more common ones. We understand that medical assistance pays for medical services, but they also pay for ambulances, emergency room, inpatient and outpatient hospital care, early and periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment and family planning. In addition, home health services for people 21 and older, lab and x-rays, nurse midwives, nursing facilities, family and certified pediatric nurse practitioners, and rural health clinics. So the list goes on and on. Many of these things I'm aware of, and some I weren't aware of because I just haven't come across them as much. Prescription drugs, including birth control, unless they're on Medicare. Medicare Part D provides drug coverage. Again, intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities, dental services, transportation services called Minnesota non-emergency transportation, where the van can deliver door-to-door or door-through-door transportation from your home to the medical clinic visit. Alcohol and drug treatment, chiropractic services, home health care for those under 21, eyeglasses, hearing aids, WIC nutrition programs, women, infant, and children nutrition program, mental health treatment, private duty nursing, podiatry, hospice care, preventative health services, prosthetics, and then child therapeutic services that we mentioned earlier, and adult rehabilitative mental services, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So some additional services, we'll kind of go into a little bit more detail about these. These are more or less programs. Instead of a specific service like going to the doctor, these are programs. So most people are very familiar with PCA services, personal care attendant services. They include home health aid, nursing, and they focus on bathing, dressing, grooming, feeding, behavioral support sometime. Recently, within the last couple weeks, the federal government approved a new service called Community First Services and Support. This is a service that will be self-directed, which means you're the manager, you're the boss, you're the employer, you set the rate of pay within a range, and PCA Choice Services will become CFSS, Community First Services and Support. It won't happen right away because it was just approved by the federal government. The state needs to do quite a lot of work. Maybe by the end of the year, first part of next year, finally, after so many years of promising that it's going to happen, it'll occur. It'll be, the good part is that the budget will be the same as your PCA assessment. And so if your budget for PCA is $80 a day, Community First Services and Supports will be the same budget, $80 a day. Whereas some of the services we're going to talk about, like Consumer Support Grant, are the state share or less than the full budget. And so that has some potential to be more. It'll address the heavy use of waiver services. Some people will maybe get a higher budget through Community First Services and Supports. They might choose to use that service instead of waivered services. So keep in tune to that, CFSS, and watch the news and see where that's going. Community Support, Consumer Support Grant, CSG, has been around for quite a long time. In Minnesota, not every county offers Consumer Support Grant, but if you're a person that's interested in Consumer Support Grant, you might be able to find a host county, a host neighboring county that could administer the grant on the county that you live in's behalf. I know that Dakota County does that for a few other counties, and so Hennepin might do that for a couple counties as well. So depending on where you are, you can take a look at that. The Consumer Support Grant is one of those stepping stone programs if you're waiting for a MnChoices assessment, but you already have a PCA assessment and you're open to medical assistance. This is a program you can use right away. There's no waiting period. It might take you, I don't know, a month or less. In Hennepin County, it will take about a month to get open to the service. The counties, depending on their process, it might be longer. It's a cash grant based on the home care rating you have for PCA. It's the state share of that budget, so it's not 50%. Sometimes it's less than that, 40%. But if you can't find staff for PCA, it's better to use the money to have horseback riding therapy, art therapy, music therapy, prescribe special diet, be paid as a parent of a child to provide care for the child less than 18, or to be paid to provide care for your husband or wife, than to not have services. So sometimes it's a choice you want to make. To administer this program, we use an agency or many agencies in Minnesota called Financial Management Services. Because you are the employer, you write the plan, you hire the staff, you train the staff, you set the rate of pay within a range, decide the services. The Financial Management Service, which is required, pays the bills and processes the payroll. So people will have their payroll deposited in their bank on a regular basis, just like any other job, once they complete their pay sheet. This is another program in addition to PCA Choice, which will be converted to and become Community First Services and Support. I think I said consumer, it should be Community First Services and Support late next year or early the following year. So that's pretty fun and pretty exciting. Something you want to check into. We don't hear about this a lot, but it's a good service, adult rehabilitative mental health services. You get this service by going to your doctor and getting a prescription. And then you can look on a website called MNHelp, mnhelp.org, and just put in ARMS services, and your city or county and a list of ARMS providers will come up. You take that prescription to the provider, and they will give you several hours, depending on what your doctor prescribed, of services paid through straight medical assistance. It's help with mental health support, problem solving, helping to schedule appointments, having somebody to listen to you and kind of be there in addition to the other services you had. If you had consumer support grant, you can have this service too. If you had a waiver, you can have this service too, in addition to it. It's one-to-one service. The providers are certified. The agents are certified. It's rehabilitative, so it's teaching skills, and it's focused on independence and mental health, improving a person's mental health. So something to think about for adults living at home. Very similar service, very similar description. You also get the authorization from your doctor, child therapeutic support services. Same criteria as the adult version. This is just for children age 18 or less. And we have a number of services that require county case management. They require county case management because it's a higher level of care. It's beyond what straight medical assistance service would provide. It's more than bathing, dressing, grooming. It's about habilitative services or medically necessary services as well. Some examples, some of these we're going to talk about in more detail. Respite, homemaker, home delivered meals. You can't get these services on straight PCA. You can only get them through the waiver. Skill building or habilitative services, vocational supports, vocational exploration, vocational development, vocational support, and self-directed services like consumer-directed community support, where there's a larger budget and you become the employer, much like consumer support grant. Life skills training and other services. So when you are applying to the county for services in general, you're waiting for that MnChoices assessment. These are the kind of things that are helpful to bring with you the first day, so you don't have to go back and get a release and bring them back other days. So providing a legal birth certificate, a social security card, the last plan that you had through the county or the school, your most recent school assessment, a medical exam that's current, if you have any current IQ assessments. Some of the services like the DD waiver require a current IQ assessment, current adaptive behavioral assessment, and a social history. The social history is important because many services want to find out, when did your disability occur? Did your disability occur before age 21 or after age 21? Before age 21, it's considered developmental. After age 21, it might be considered other things, including maybe a brain injury. So you have different criteria that you could qualify for. Some people qualify for more than one service at a time, so you want to make an informed choice of which service is the best for you at that time. A rule you want to be aware of is Rule 185. It's for people with developmental disabilities and related conditions. It includes or guarantees case management and in many cases, vocational services. As it indicates here, for years and years, vocational services were guaranteed. Recent legislative action removed that requirement, but in all essence, all counties are continuing to provide vocational services for people after age 21. So guaranteed case management and vocational supports after 21. Case management could be at any time. A common time is transition, age 14 to 21. You can access those before that if you had a reason to do that, and vocational services ongoing. So when you're looking for Rule 185 case management, the county is looking for a couple things. They're looking for what is the standardized IQ? Is it 70 or below? It's kind of a line in the sand. It doesn't, we're going to talk about related condition in a minute. So IQs can be higher, but starting the conversation, if they're 70 or less, then you're pretty solidly qualifying for as a person with a developmental disability. They're also looking for adaptive functioning and standard deviations below the mean in communication, daily living skills, socialization, or motor skills. They want to have a couple of those. So when you look at a person's day, I'm describing how is their communication. Do they have an alternative way to communicate, or do they communicate with words like you and I do? How are their friends? Are they involved with friends going out and being involved? What's their socialization like? What are their motor skills like as well? Again, it's things that occur before age 21 that are developmental in nature. Some things to think about. Then we have related conditions. In addition to having services that meet the needs of people with developmental disabilities, the state has a broader lens or a broader brush where they're also annually doing an assessment, or should be annually doing an assessment for related conditions. So these are situations like being a person with a seizure disorder, or having Prader-Willi syndrome, or having autism, where your IQ might be higher than 70, but the other things that you are experiencing in life are more like a person with a developmental disability. So there's a standard checklist that the state of Minnesota uses. They're supposed to do it every year, keep it in the file. We get dinged if it's not in the file. And so you could be a person with autism with a much higher IQ, but still qualify for developmental disabilities under the related conditions checklist. These are things that counties must do kind of in process. They determine eligibility. They assign a caseworker. Sometimes it'll be the assessor or the resource manager initially before it gets to the formal case manager. They develop a plan as a result of a min-choices assessment called the Community Services and Support Plan. They allocate the resources based on the plan and the assessed needs. Assessed needs are really, really important. We hear more and more about that all the time. So when you have an assessment, it is so important to be brutally honest about your situation, about the needs of the person. When you're out mowing the lawn and the person's in their house by themselves, what's happening? Are they able to take a bath? Are they able to get breakfast? Are they able to wake up? What do they need in addition? So they allocate resources based on the assessment. They approve the services. And then you have meetings throughout the day with the team, the interdisciplinary team, and they monitor health and safety and determine the effectiveness of the plan. annually. For children's mental health case management, in addition to developmental disability, there's a couple other criteria. And so these services serve all people with disabilities as well. So eligible participants must be an adult with serious persistent mental illness or a child with severe emotional disturbance, as defined by mental health professional within a diagnostic assessment. And so there's a lot more detail in here to describe the level of support the person needs. Mental health sometimes is more cyclic, where you have good days and bad days, or good periods of the year and worse periods of the year where you need more support. And so it's assessing whatever period of the year you're in. Initial eligibility is based on diagnostic assessment as it's been completed within the last 180 days. And then it must be completed every 36 months to determine the person's continued eligibility. So sometimes people stay open to mental health services. Sometimes they get better, they move off, versus people with developmental disabilities tend to continue with case management for a longer period of time. Really depends on your situation. In choices assessment, we've mentioned that a few times. Maybe the slide should have been a little sooner, but it's a statewide standardized assessment that all 87 counties use. It's about 600 questions or more. They don't ask all the questions. They observe a lot of things. So if you're walking around during the assessment, they can check the box that you're ambulatory because they saw you walking around. If you're talking and speaking, they understand that you can communicate as well. But there's a lot of things they're not able to see when they walk in that you're going to have to tell them and be really, really honest about. Some people say, well, why did my neighbor get this and this and this and this? Well, one, their needs are different probably. And two, maybe they didn't communicate, or they communicated more about the situation than you might have. And so, I don't want to keep going, but it's just really important to be as honest as possible. Sometimes it's helpful to have a friend with you to help you remember what you want to talk about, to kind of get you to the point of what you want to discuss. So you don't forget about talking about something. It also kind of relieves the tension to have a friend with you as well, because then it's not you and the county or you and the assessor, it's you and somebody else who knows a person really well that can kind of speak up and help you through the process a little bit. Family Support Grant is a program that does need a county case manager to access. You have to be certified disabled through the state medical review team or open to Social Security. And you have to be screen eligible for intermediate care facility level of care. You can be eligible from birth to a little less than age 25. Even though that's true, you can't apply after age 18. So it's like, well, that's not very fair, but that's how it's set up. There's some income limits. I think it might be higher than 109,000 now, but it's a significant income limit per family to apply for this grant, and the grant is about $3,200 a year. We often don't use financial management services. We send checks to families, or we send checks to the vendor. So if you're looking for camp or respite, or you need a ramp to your house, or you have some other project you're looking on, we would send a check to the vendor of that service and then keep track of it. It helps us because if we send checks to families, we had to sit down with them every year and have coffee and look to the shoebox of all the receipts for the whole year and say, okay, check, did you do this? Okay, got this. And it's just a little more time efficient to have the check go to a provider of service and then ensure that the service was completed. So we don't talk about Family Support Grant a lot, but that's another service where you're waiting for a Min Choices assessment. You can access and get that fund right away. And after those funds are used, you can apply for the Consumer Support Grant and use those funds until you open to another service like the waiver. So it's just another way of a strategy to use services. How many people, if I had show of hands, it'd be interesting to see how many people have heard of the home and community-based waiver. I'm assuming a lot of you have, because it's very popular. It has had waiting lists in the past of 8 years or more when I was in my career earlier. And then Jesse Ventura, remember him? He was our governor at one time. And he gave all the money back from the taxes. And in 3 months, we added 1,345 people in Hennepin County to the waiver. Can you imagine that? How busy we were? We had meetings every single week at libraries, informational sessions. We had emergency guardianship hearings at the courts, and we added 1,304. We called it the Waiver Odyssey at the time. We added 1,345 people in 3 months. It was amazing. The following year, we didn't get any more funding, which is sad, and so then our waiting list went back up again. But since then, it's leveled off, and officially there's not a waiting list, but it doesn't mean you don't have to wait. It means you don't have to wait 8 years if you meet that level of care. It doesn't mean everybody gets one. Why doesn't everybody have this? Because everybody doesn't need a live-in caregiver or respite or homemaker or home delivered meals or individualized community support services, that higher level of care. These are flexible services that allow you to live at home versus live in a nursing home, a hospital, or an intermediate care facility. I can assure you we'd all love to live at home versus being in an institutional setting. And living at home is less expensive than living in a hospital, obviously. And so that's why the state is so heavily invested in this program, because it's less expensive to live at home where we want to live anyway than to live in an institutional setting. You must meet the level of care. You must be certified disabled through the state medical review team or open to Social Security. And you must exceed the need for using the services of straight medical assistance. So you need more than just PCA. That's an informed choice. Often with PCA services, you might get 24 hours a day of services. You might get nursing for 24 hours a day. For PCA, if you have a lot of direct physical care needs, and through the waiver, you might not get that level of care because it waivers apples, oranges. It's a different program. So you have to make a choice of which program is in your best interest, which program makes the most sense for you based on that. Knowing where the money comes from, knowing what services you can get through the program can be really helpful. Just to review, we have different levels of care through the waiver. Intermediate care facility. An intermediate care facility is a place I used to work with in the 80s. I worked there. They have a dietitian. They have a nurse. They have fire drills once a month, sometimes during the day, sometimes in the middle of the month. The dietitian creates meals with they have a cup of vegetables, a cup of starch, 4 ounces of meat, or 4 ounces of protein, and they're very prescriptive and kind of institutional in nature. They look like house. They look like a standard house in the neighborhood, but they're licensed as an intermediate care facility. And that is for the DD waiver, to have that level of care. The level of care of a hospital. So through consumer-directed community support, I did a lot of one-to-one training with county staff on CAC waiver, which is hospital level of care. Their budgets are very significant. They might be $300,000 a year or more, and that sounds really great. But it's hard to get staff 24 hours, 7 days a week. So sometimes parents end up having to quit their job and move home to care for their child. And that can be really, really hard. But it is a great service because it does offer a lot of resources. If you can find the staffing, it can be really, really helpful to have the nursing there and live at home versus a hospital. Nursing home level of care has 2 levels for the CADI waiver, community alternatives for disabled individuals, and the brain injury waiver. They both have nursing home level of care, but the brain injury also has neurobehavioral hospital level of care. So a person that requires assistance beyond a nursing home that has a brain injury, there's 2 levels of care with that. So in your mind, just know there's currently today 4 levels of care through waivers that you must meet to access waivered services. Again, if you have grandparents, if you have elderly parents, there's programs through the waiver the waiver program called the elderly waiver is paid through medical assistance. There's another program called the alternative care program, which is not paid through medical assistance. It's a state program. If you don't have enough money to pay for a nursing home for 5 months, they will do a financial assessment to determine that. And then you can apply for the alternative care program to keep you at home versus having to go to a nursing home to a more expensive environment. So the elderly waiver and the alternative care program are two other programs for folks over 65. Before we get to that, any questions so far? Linda, you're on mute.
Yes, we have a lot of questions. Okay, let's just start. Well, this has come up in a couple different ways. Scott County said they won't make the referral for SMRT since our son is already on MA. And I can start the answer to that because if you are on MA, you can get consumer support grants, you can get PCA, you can ask for straight MA. And so there's a number of services that become available that you don't have to have the SMRT referral for. If you're trying to change to a waiver, then you need the SMRT referral. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Within, I mean, each county has its own personality, it has its own politics, it has its own budgets. Some counties have more money than other counties. Some counties are growing, some counties are not growing. So there's an ebb and a flow. In Hennepin County for a while, if we had waiver resources available at one time, we would concentrate it on groups of people that had unmet needs at the time. So we concentrate the 20 new waivers on transition age. We concentrate the new waivers on adults, or we concentrate on children. And so it was looking at the needs of the county broadly and trying to be as fair as possible in order to do that within the money that the state legislature had granted us. We would try to overbook the airplane, so to speak. If we had 50 waivers, we would distribute 75 because by the time 75 waivers were used, we would have that money from the state because it would take 2 or 3 months to get things going. And we kind of knew that. So it depends on, again, the politics of the county, the financial well-being of the county, and if they're growing or not, for kind of why they're doing that.
Okay. Could the consumer support grant be used for private signed language? Music therapy, I know the answer is yes. Private sign.
It could be used for consumer support grant is a more flexible service than the waiver. It's a more flexible service than consumer support grant. So today you could get vitamins and solutions through consumer support grant, which you cannot get through consumer directed community support. You could certainly have a sign language classes paid through consumer support grant and adaptive modified classes as well. Each county, 87 counties, there's a lot of counties in Minnesota, develops their own criteria that's reviewed by the state. The state wants some consistency, but there's still some differences between lead agencies or counties based on what their plan was that was submitted to the state of Minnesota.
Okay. My understanding is Hennepin County uses the PCA assessment to determine eligibility for PCA consumer support grant. What is the process in Hennepin County for switching from a consumer support grant to a waiver if you feel the consumer support grant is not adequately meeting the needs of your loved one?
Sure. It's to talk to your assessor if you don't have a case manager, since case management is not required, or to talk to your case manager about that. Make that request. Make a request for waiver. Use the words that we're teaching you. Use the words, I need respite, I need homemaker, I need home delivered meals, I need all these services that are unmet. I have the following unmet needs. Pretty soon people are going to catch on that I'm telling people that. Right? They'll say, Jerry, don't understand that. No. Anyway,
Yeah.
use those words, talk about the unmet services that exist, and then ask them to make a referral.
Mhm.
They should
And
be able to make a referral.
right, and min choices assessments are required to be done annually, and so that's also a good time to talk about your unmet needs.
Yes, it would be a really good time to do that. A good time to get to be really, really honest. Can't tell you how many people are underserved because they're not telling people exactly what's going on because they just don't want to share that information. Even culturally, I just talked with a support planner that's a Spanish speaking. He has a Spanish organization, and you don't want to share information with strangers. It's not comfortable. It's not something that we're used to doing, but they have a role. They abide by data privacy, so they're not going to share the information publicly. They're going to share the information on your behalf. So,
Mhm. When a person turns 18, they still need to be on TEFRA.
is that a question or a statement?
It has two question marks after it.
Once they're 18, then most cases the person's own income is considered, and people with disabilities have limited income in most cases because they're open to Social Security. Then there's no copay anyway, but you start opening medical assistance as an individual versus under TEFRA. There are some limited situations up until age 23 if you're providing a lot of help and assistance and food and rent and all these things that they would continue under your guidance. But in most cases at 18, you apply for Social Security under your own name, get an income, and then you can apply for medical assistance again as an adult.
Mhm. And usually it's pretty seamless. So for when there was a parental fee, the only thing that I think that ever really changed was that there was no longer a parental fee, and then the MA just continued.
Mhm.
Also, there's another program for when people turn 18 or older and get a job. And I don't know that you're going to address this tonight, but the MAEPD program where people can work and also continue to receive their MA services. So
And because of legislative changes, I believe that the asset limit is unlimited
that's
for
true. Yep.
MAPDP, medical assistance for employed persons with disabilities. So lots of reasons to go to training and learn information. If you could make, is it $80, $60 to $80 a month at a job, then you qualify for the program.
Yeah, I
Medical
think it's
assistance.
it's is it 60 or 65? But it has to be it's 65 and 1 penny. It has to be over $65. So or in order to qualify for that. So
Right.
mhm.
You can have unlimited assets, which makes it a great thing.
Yeah, it is. Um, for anyone with a neurodiverse child, MA also pays for EIDBI. I think that's more a
True.
statement. How do you get or qualify for assistance if you were denied SSI? Well, and
Consumer support grant doesn't require, they require a PCA assessment. So if you meet the criteria for a PCA, you could access that. There's some county funds sometimes available. And the county has some limited county funds available. Other counties like Dakota have some county funds available for people that quote unquote fall through the cracks or might not meet criteria. So you can ask about those things. The Department of Vocational Rehabilitation might be able to offer some supports as well if you're looking for vocational services. So don't just stop, keep asking questions and see what might be available out there to help you out.
yeah.
And you can also appeal Social Security. So the majority of people that apply the first time are denied here. So appeal that and then, submit a more robust application next time and see where it goes from there. Then you get all the money back from the first date you applied until the date you were accepted the second time in a large check.
And also, we get a lot of calls about this for families that have young children. And so, unless in that situation, they're looking at parents' income. So, when a child turns 18, they're eligible based on their own income. And so, a lot of times, the denial for SSI is based on financial reasons. And so, what people really need is to apply for county services to get the services that they're looking for.
It's more common to apply at 18 for Social Security, but Sometimes you need that when you're younger, if you're very physically involved in.
Mhm, mhm. Is there a way to find providers who accept MA? For example, we need an orthodontist.
There are lists out there. I don't have them right in front of me right now, but there are lists out there. I understand that dentists are hard to find. Sometimes if you move to managed care, Minshow, Hennepin Health, UCare, they have more access to dentists. They reimburse a little bit more than straight medical assistants. So I'm not advocating that everybody move to managed care. I'm just saying, depending on your insurance product, you might have a navigator through a managed care organization that can help you access services as well. So,
Okay. If you have MA as your secondary insurance, will they still cover the stuff on the straight MA slides?
very good question. That's called cost-effective medical assistance. It's something that's encouraged. If you have work insurance, you can apply for medical assistance, and medical assistance will pay the co-pays that your work insurance wouldn't pay, and the medical assistance will also pay for the cost of insurance for the child. And so there's some good options for that. Simple process. You talk to your financial case aide at the county you live in. They'll do a simple calculation to make sure that it's cost effective, and they'll enroll you in medical assistance, cost effective medical assistance.
And the reverse of that is if you have private insurance, we've had this question come up. If you have private insurance and you're going to go on TEFRA, should you drop your private insurance? I mean, it used to be that there was a little bit higher parental fee if you did that.
True, true.
But
So
now
now,
without the parental fee, is there a reason to keep your primary insurance?
I mean, one reason might be to maintain the doctor that you're familiar with for years and years and years versus to have to go to another group of practitioners. So that would be a primary reason, I would assume, to maintain continuity.
Is there an income limit on medical assistance? How does one apply for medical assistance? Is that through the MinChoices assessment? So yes.
One of the first couple slides that we provided gave you some really concrete instructions on how to apply for Minnesota Care, which is the vehicle that you're applying for medical assistance through. They have these helpers, some resource assistance in various languages that you can also access as well. I think the asset limit for medical assistance generally without it being employed is around $2,000. If you're employed, you can access the service we talked about, medical assistance for employed persons with disabilities. And then there's no asset limit because of legislative action that happened relatively recently. I think it was last year.
Okay. They keep coming. The number on my screen, I keep getting rid of these and then
okay.
the number. So do you want to continue on or do you want to take a few more?
We can continue. I think we have more information to share. I want to make sure that we had some time to answer questions.
Yes.
I think we'll have plenty of time after this to answer more questions as well. So, all right. So this is kind of an eye test. This is what you're not supposed to do in PowerPoint presentations, put all these words here. But I wanted to give you an idea of through the home and community-based waiver, what services and options are really available. These are all the services available. And the nice part about it is that the state's moving to combine the waivers in the future through something called Waiver Reimagine. And so if you have the DD waiver, the CADI waiver, the brain injury waiver, the CAC waiver, the services are more or less the same now. They've been working towards that for years and years and years, but for more or less now, they're the same menu of services. Before, if you had the brain injury waiver or the CAC waiver, you had 2 pages of services that were very, very different from each other because the populations you serve were very different. But now all those services have been added to the menu. If you go to the Disability Services Program Manual, you can Google it. My favorite tool, Google, just put in MN, DHS, And you could add the service, 24-hour emergency assistance, or you could add caregiver living expenses, or you could just put in developmental disabilities waiver. And you put that in, like developmental disabilities waiver, and a page like this will come up. And you can click on each of these services and get a full page that describes each of these services. It describes the law it came from. It describes the provider qualifications. It describes the reimbursement rates in many cases, and it describes what that service does. So it can be really, really helpful. Remember that Disability Services Program Manual, DSPM. I don't have a slide for that, but it's an important piece. So kind of going through some of these, 24-hour emergency assistance is a service that hasn't always been available, but it's a plan you can develop with your case manager. It could be maybe you're living in your own apartment and I don't know, you don't really need to have somebody living in with you, but it would be nice to know that if I needed something in the middle of the night, sometime once in a while, I could cover that. And so through your provider, you can make an arrangement for something called 24-hour emergency assistance where that person's available. Maybe you have a housemate and you need to go to the doctor at 3 in the morning and the housemate can't be alone. And so maybe you call that number, the person comes over, stays with the other person, and you can go to the doctor and come back. Adult daycare bath. If you're an adult and you maybe have a husband or wife that's working during the day, you need some place for a meaningful activity. Maybe your house isn't accessible and so your bathroom's not accessible. So you get to have a chance to have an accessible bath and take care of hygiene needs a couple times during the week. That could be a nice thing. Excuse me. Caregiver living expenses. This is amazing. This is a service that pays for a live-in caregiver. It pays for that person's rent and their portion of the food. We divide rent and food by 2 or 3 if there's 3 people living in a home. And the provider, the waiver provider, sends a check to that person or the guardian or the live-in caregiver. There's not a way to do it. There's different ways to do it as long as that reimbursement happens. Annually, we calculate how much it is for rent and food. We divide it by the appropriate amount, and the live-in caregiver can't be related. So you can't be your mom, can't be your dad. It cannot be your cousin or brother. It has to be somebody that's unrelated. And they are like a roommate. So you also can't compel them and say you must be here at 10 o'clock every day. Otherwise, you need to pay them because you've said you have to be here at 10 o'clock, so you need to pay me. You've compelled me. You can say things like, let me know if you can't be here at 10 o'clock so I can make a plan. They live there for free. They're expected to be paid for at least 1 hour a day in addition, or as many hours as you like in addition. So a great option for many people that want to live in their own apartment that need a little extra support. And then they get to live in a nicer place because they get a 2-bedroom instead of a 1-bedroom. They can afford a little bit more. Case management, we've been talking about, is included through the waiver. The money for the case manager is not a part of your individual budget, part of the aggregate, or it's in addition to the budget. Community residential services is our new fancy word for group home. So if you live in any type of a licensed setting, a group home, an intermediate care facility, or a group home paid through waivered services that traditionally had maybe 4 people and 2 staff or 3 people and 1 staff, that's now called a community residential service, or a CRS. I'm going to wait and talk about consumer-directed community support in a little bit because that's a very different service. It's I often describe it as kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy's house is flying through the air and she lands in the land of Oz, and we go from the black and white film to the colored film with munchkins, and so it's a very different service. Crisis respite is an option that we can pay up to $1,000 a day for, into 14 crisis beds for a time-limited period of time, or maybe staff come to your house to augment your staff, or maybe people come to do a behavioral assessment or an environmental assessment to help to rectify a situation until you can get more resources or staff or supports or training in to support the person better if they're having some kind of a behavioral crisis. Anytime you see extended in front of a service, it means it's a waivered service, but extended, we have home care through PCA, so you can get home care through PCA, but extended home care means you can get time-limited additional services paid through the waiver. There's also extended PCA. So if you had maybe 5 hours of PCA a day, you were hospitalized because you had surgery, you're coming back home and you need more care, lifting and transferring and help with meals, maybe they're going to give you 10 hours. And the difference between 5 and 10 are extended PCA services for a time-limited period until you're better. We have employment. We used to have, 5 years ago, day training and habilitation centers, DTNHs. So what are you going to do? I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go through transition and graduate, and then I'm going to go to a DTNH for the rest of my life. And DTNHs do not practically exist anymore. We have these services instead, which are individualized employment development, developing a job, finding a job, developing work. Maybe it's a micro enterprise. Maybe it's a micro business where I want to have a dog food delivery business, which exists, or I want to have a bakery, which exists, a cottage industry, and those are real things. Employment exploration. So the idea of having exploration. Who are you? What are your interests? What do you like to do in your spare time? What gives you joy? Like the Japanese motto where you look at an item, if it gives you joy, you keep it, and if it doesn't give you joy, you put it away or move it on. What kind of work do you want to be doing for the rest of your life? What are your skills and abilities? And then support. So support is what we're used to. Support job coaches, a staff with a 1-to-3 ratio or 1-to-1 ratio. Excuse me. These are all options. Family training, counseling, and education. This is a really broad area where people could attend a self-advocacy conference. You could have person-centered planning done through family training and counseling if you wanted to. So it's a very open area for teaching families and training and providing them information. Family residential services are a new name for family foster care. So family residential services would be family foster care, which is generally a person or a couple providing care for a person or a couple people in their own home. Home delivered meals. You can have 1 meal a day, 7 days a week from an agency that's contracted through the waiver to do that. You can have Meals on Wheels, meals that are frozen and sent and you have to thaw them out, put in the microwave. Meals that are fresh, delivered 1 week at a time that you put in the fridge and just warm up. Homemaker, cooking, cleaning, dusting. Homemaker can also help you to put meals together ahead of time so you could just warm them up if you needed them. It's instead of using the stove if that's not something that you wanted to do or a skill that you have. Independent living skills therapies, teaching people how to use the stairs again once they had an accident. They had to learn to use the stairs again or open a car door, all those things. Integrated community support. There's so many services here. We just go on and on. Is a new service through Waiver Reimagined. It's a service that's in between community residential setting or a group home, and in between living in your own apartment or a home that you own. Integrated community supports are services in an apartment setting in a building owned or controlled by the provider of services. They provide one-to-one services for the person. They're teaching, training, educating, providing habilitative services there. And so it's kind of in the middle and it's new. Because it's new, we're learning a lot. There's a lot of kind of bumps in the road. The state of Minnesota now has, I believe, 700 applications for integrated community support services where they're certifying buildings. Providers have to certify the building. Once they do that, nobody else can provide integrated community supports in that building. And so there's kind of a rush to do that. Modifications to your home and adaptations to your home. If you live in a home and you need a wheelchair, you need a ramp to your home. You probably have need grab bars in the bathroom. You might need a van that has a lowered floor or a ramp or a raised roof. So we pay for their modifications up to $40,000 a year per household. There's some exceptions where we can look at increasing that if it's needed individually based on need. Those modifications are outside of the budget. So your budget might be $40,000 a year. You could spend $40,000 in addition to that to modify the home. There's some exceptions with consumer-directed community support. They use $5,000 within the budget, and then $35,000 would be outside the budget. Night supervision, I have a story that I want to tell about night supervision. So previous to recently, night supervision was only a awake position. You had to be awake. And so there was a gentleman I was working with that had autism, and he was pretty sneaky. He would come down at 3 in the morning and he would see if the staff were awake. And if they were awake, he was like, yay, we get to go out and do some fun stuff all day long, right? And so the staff really weren't ready to do things at 3 in the morning. So they would pretend that they were sleeping because the criteria was they needed to be awake, but they knew if they were awake, the person would engage with them and they'd have to go out and do stuff at 3 in the morning. So they'd pretend that they were sleeping. And then the person would see them and go back upstairs and go back to bed until 6 or 7. And so the people kind of got in trouble from the provider because the provider said, you cannot sleep. This is an awake night position. And some people that were pretending to sleep kind of fell asleep by accident. You know, it kind of happened. But now currently, you can be awake or sleeping, depending on the need of the person. So we kind of fix that problem a little bit. Night supervision can be awake or sleeping. Positive support services. What do we need to do to help a person move in a really positive direction, to be less frustrated, less angry, less engaged in conflict and things like that? So positive support services talk about positive ways to spend time with people, to spend more time with people that they like to spend time with, more time engaging them with positive activities that help them move in a good direction. Pre-vocational services, teaching people to work, teaching people to be on time, to be structured, to have a rhythm to work, those kind of things. Respite is a break for you as a primary caregiver. It could be hourly, it could be daily, it could be a weekly. It gets kind of expensive because there's always overtime after 40 hours. So if you have a respite provider that's there for a whole day, it's 24 hours. Then the next day is 48 hours. So you have 8 hours of overtime. The next day is all overtime because it's time and a half during that pay period. So it gets kind of expensive. Specialized equipment and supplies include sensory devices where you can determine if a person's in bed or not in bed, if the refrigerator is open or closed, if the stove was on or off, if the door opened or closed, and when they came back again after it was open or closed, and personal response systems as well. Transportation, we're getting a little creative in using Uber or Lyft a little bit with vocational services. There's some demonstration projects that are happening. With consumer-directed community support, we can use Uber or Lyft on a limited basis for more urgent types of needs. So otherwise, it's usually a staff getting reimbursed for mileage for use of their vehicle, or maybe a transportation company providing a trip. We can pay per trip or per mile. We don't talk a lot about transition services, but imagine you were living in a nursing home, and in order to qualify for medical assistance, you had to spend down all the things you owned to get to the asset limit of maybe $2,000 to live in the nursing home because you needed to, because you had more care and support needs than you could handle at home. And then you got better. After years, a couple of years, you got better. You wanted to move back to an apartment again. Transitional services offer around $3,000 to help you with moving expenses, with certain things like adaptive furniture for deposits. There's a really nice list that you can look up on the Disability Services Program Manual, excuse me, about transition services. So don't forget about those. Those are really important and sometimes surprising supports that are available for people as well. So any questions about the services through the waiver now that I've spoken for such a long time? Linda, you have mute again.
I apologize for that again. There is one, is there a way to get waiver services or if you are a disabled adult, but due to a spouse income, you don't qualify for MA?
If you're 65 or older, you can qualify through the alternative care program. Otherwise, maybe there's a county service or support that might be available, but pretty much you have to qualify for MA.
Okay. You know what? There was another one related to that. Well, I almost just have to do them in order. It says declare, well, hold on one second. How much respite time do you get per month? How do you quantify respite care to get reimbursed? Do children qualify for positive support services? It says positive support services waiver. So that's, they have
Sure.
to have a waiver.
Yeah. Positive support services are a service, not a waiver, and children and adults do qualify because children and adults are served under the waiver. Regarding respite for children, technically you can have respite up to less than 30 days, so 29 days. More than 30 days is considered placement, and because of the Family Preservation Act, we can't easily place children outside of the home, but less than 30 days would be probably okay, but maybe frowned upon. That's kind of a lot, unless you're going on a trip or going to camp or something. Typically, weekly respite or every other weekend respite is more common. To have somebody come in and give you a break every other weekend or once a week for a day or something like that, so you can regenerate your batteries again. So there's not a list of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. It's based on your assessed need and your situation, basically.
And so when you're talking about not more than 30 days, you know, every other weekend is 26 weekends or you know,
30 days per month, consecutive days per month.
per month. Okay, just wanted to make sure we clarified that.
Good
Okay.
point.
Well, okay, then we just go back to we still have about 20 questions that we haven't covered yet. Do you want to finish first? And because these
Yeah,
go
I
back
think
to all kinds of things.
pretty well. We'll do. We're kind of getting towards the end anyway. So
Let me, I just because I'm worried that some people are starting to drop off, I just wanted to draw people's attention to the chat where we have some resources that have been identified if you want to check those out. And we also have, well, I guess it mostly is resources. There's a link to the slide deck if you want to see that. And I just want to remind people that that we want them to fill out a survey at the end. If you're looking for an attendance certificate, if you fill out the survey, that will pop up for you. And if you do forget, we will be sending those out 24 hours after the end of this talk. So I just didn't cover that at the beginning and have wanted to get that in before people start drifting away. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, so we saved consumer-directed community support, which is a self-directed service, separately because it's very different. We kind of alluded to the Wizard of Oz and how it's different. It allows you to be the employer, and they're not kidding. You are the employer. You have a federal and state tax ID number, a workers' compensation number. There's a website here there's a really good video in the middle of the website. You can click on it. Kind of tells a story about a family that put a mini elevator, a mini Vader in their home, and they're having horseback riding therapy. It shows the horse, and the parent is talking about how their life has changed because of consumer-directed community support. It offers horseback riding therapy, art therapy, music therapy, prescribed special diet, as well as allowing parents to be paid as staff of minor children and husbands and wives to be paid as staff for their husband or wife as well. You can have blended services up to 1-to-3 staff ratio. You can have an increase of 30% to your budget based on a vocational goal, a behavioral goal, or moving somewhere. You can have an increase. Some people look at the budget. The budgets for CDCS are generally going to be lower. Sometimes they're higher for children and adults with autism, but generally they're lower. But don't just stop and say, oh my gosh, it's lower, I'm not going to do it. The administrative costs for this are significantly much less than traditional license services. If you're using individualized housing support with training, which is a waiver reimagined service, you're going to pay your staff. The agency is going to pay the staff $17, $18 an hour. They're going to charge $60 or $50 an hour to offer that service. So your money goes fast under traditional services. Under CDCS, the minimum wage you can pay somebody right now is $19 an hour. It's probably going to cost you $21 total, because you just have to pay the state taxes, workers' compensation, and Social Security. So even though your budget is less, the money goes further. You have to be a person that wants to be directing the services. You write the plan, you hire the staff, you train the staff, you supervise the staff, you set the rate of pay. You might have to fire the staff if they're not performing. Generally, you write a job description. And we're really lucky because of the benefits of modern technology. There's an email list now of 700 people around the state of Minnesota, all 87 counties, all financial management services, and many support planners that come to a meeting the first Monday of every month and talk about consumer-directed community support. And they talk about the best practices, they try and learn from each other, etc. So these are the available services through CDCS that I mentioned before. If they have an asterisk at the end of them, that means they have to have a prescription from a doctor, or you have to complete something called the alternative treatment form, where the doctor signs off and says that it's non-experimental, that it's going to help and support the person as well. So that can be good. With Waiver Reimagine, which is a reorganization of waiver services that the state is in process of doing in the future, CDCS will become, the name will not be CDCS anymore, it'll be self-directed services. So within your budget, you can have licensed traditional services or self-directed services, and you can choose which ones you want within the same budget, so you have more flexibility. You'd have the same case manager no matter what. If you had a CDCS or self-directed services or traditional, you'd have the same case manager that was working with you. So that's something that's coming in the future. A financial management service is something we've referenced for the consumer support grant. We use these agencies for consumer support grant. We use them for consumer-directed community support. Now I think there might be close to 15 in the state of Minnesota. There's not hundreds, but there's 15. We meet with them every month with that large meeting. Because you're the employer, these agencies help advise you about employment information. They pay the bills. They bill medical assistance. They pay for the goods and services. They let you know if you've underspent or overspent as well. So they help you to become an employer, and they're required to use for those self-directed services. And we're at the end, which is really great. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them today or within the next several months. If you have an individual situation, you can always call Pacer and always talk to Linda, because she's the best. But if you have other situations, you can call me too, and I'd be happy to talk through. Whether you live in Hennepin County or if you live in Thief River Falls, it doesn't matter. And you're on mute.
I remembered to unmute this time.
Yay!
Thank you. I'm just trying to go through these. We still have quite a few. And so I'm just going to start at the top, and we'll just go through as many as you're able, and you can all let me know when you've had enough. How do you get a PCA assessment without a SMRT referral?
I would just talk to a PCA agency and seek their advice. When you talk to a PCA agency, they will have nurses that are assessors, and they can give you advice about what you need to do to meet the requirements of the service.
Okay. We're on a wait list for SMRT MA under the TEFRA option. Do we need to wait for that process to be completed to do a PCA assessment and explore a consumer support grant?
With consumer support grant, you do have to be certified disabled. So again, you could apply for Social Security and see how that goes, or wait for the SMRT process. Hopefully it won't be long. It's the first time I've heard that we have waiting lists for the SMRT process. And again, I don't understand, because the state does the process. It's not the county that's completing those questions. So,
and I think even so, it still takes a month or two to get
it
through
takes
SMRT.
a while once you get through the process. Even though you clearly have a disability, that's a frustrating part. it still takes time to show and prove on paper that you do.
And get everything together. Okay.
Mhm.
How early can someone get on a DD waiver?
If there's a need, you can get on a DD waiver as early as you need to. That's what the Admin Choices Assessment is about. At the end of the assessment, they will let you know, hopefully, all the services that you qualify for, or the Admin Choices Assessment identifies all the services that you qualify for, and then you can make an informed choice.
Okay. For DD, our child is at 70 for adaptive behaviors related to daily living. The county said it has to be below 70 to access Rule 185, but 70 is 2 standard deviations below the mean. Does a score of 70 for an adaptive on daily living qualify, or is it really below 70?
My understanding is 70 plus or minus 5 points. It's more about the story of the person. So you have the criteria of IQ. Then you have what's adaptive, what's adaptive, what other functioning is like a person with a disability. Are their communication? How's their mobility? How's their ability to self-direct? What about their socialization? It's a story. And so the more information you bring to show and prove that you are below a typical range of independence and support, the better, I guess.
I think that's a great answer. Um, who does the diagnostic assessment for mental health case management?
A number of psychologists, psychiatrists. I just had that question today, so I sent a list to a school that wanted to have a list of people that do those assessments. So
Okay.
I can provide that list to Linda if she wants that.
Okay, that would be great. Are assets taken into consideration for an alternative care program for over 65?
Yes, 100%. They're taken into care. That's into consideration. Excuse me. That is why you qualify, because you don't have enough money to pay for a nursing home for 5 months. And so they say, well, show us your IRAs, show us your bank account, show us all these things. And then as financial assessment is done, and if you qualify, then you qualify for the alternative care program, saving the state a lot of money and getting the services that you want in-home versus having to go to a nursing home. That's really the goal of it.
And does your house count as part of that?
Your house does not. Isn't that great?
That's what I thought. Yeah,
Your
because
house does not count up to a significant amount of money. And your car does not count, but yeah, house and car. The
okay.
car, I don't know, but the car, if you have a Lamborghini, that may be one thing, but typical cars do not count.
Okay, is genetic testing for autism covered under any program?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Um, I I don't understand what the steps are to apply for MA and then a waiver. I live in Hennepin County and my social worker said she doesn't really know about MA, but sent me a bunch of links. Her supervisor said that there isn't anyone that's an expert in MA because they are a contracted company.
So kind of going back up here, if you go to minsure.org, they have this nice tool where you can compare, and this tool is for looking for all insurance, even though understanding that you're looking for medical assistance. So I assume that if you answer the questions appropriately, indicate that you have a child with a disability, that it'll lead you towards medical assistance. If you go to that website, minsure.org, new customers apply. I don't know if you have to put that all in there, but minsure.org for sure. Then you can create an account and you can find free help, the last button on the right side. Once you get to find the free help, there's a broker and a navigator. So true, they are contracted through the state of Minnesota. Often these are staff that are a part of disability linkage line, senior linkage line, etc. They know a lot of information. Typically, you can also find out who your financial case aide is in your county, and they should know. The case manager might not know because there's a lot of new case managers, but they're not an expert in medical assistance. But the financial case aide or financial case manager that you might have in your county might know too. So I encourage you to look at minsure.org and try and find this tool to help you out through that process.
And we have somebody who's been struggling with the Aminture application. So is that a place that they can also go to find a navigator that can help them
Yeah,
with it?
they can go to this page and click on Navigator, and hopefully they'll get a contact. I've heard that people do actually call you back and they do email you back, and so that's good news.
Okay, wonderful. How do you get or qualify for assistance if you were denied Social Security?
How do you apply? There's attorneys available. There's also organizations available. If you contact an attorney, it's usually not the first step because they're going to take a third of your settlement. If you contact organizations that get paid any way to help you to apply for Social Security, they're not going to take a portion of your settlement. They're just going to help you to apply for Social Security. Lyndon and I can work together to get a list of these organizations. I've got a couple that I know of. And then so they will help you to be more detailed in your application for Social Security. It's all about, can they make meaningful work? Can they, work enough to support themselves? And so telling that story again is really important in every different way, describing the person on the application, how they're not able to have meaningful work or what supports they need to move that direction.
Okay. I understand that after being on long-term MA facility care, that assets people own can be turned over to the state. Are there any similar financial burdens that can arise by having a child on long-term MA TEFRA?
It's not so much for TEFRA. Sorry, it's not so much for children or young adults when you get to be older. I don't know the age, if it's 55 or 60 or something. Then if you start an application, then there's a consideration of considering your assets to be open to a program, to be in a nursing home, to be in a long-term care facility, etc. It sounds like a scary thing, and it could be scary. It's just important to be informed about that. And maybe there's other options. Maybe there's a reverse mortgage, or maybe there's something else that would be easier or better. But it's not for children. You don't have to worry about that. For young adults, don't have to worry about that. But there's an age, and I don't know exactly when that is, if it's 55 or 60 or older, that they ask you to consider that. They inform you about that option.
And I don't know exactly what the situation this person's referring to. What this brings to my mind, and you probably nailed it, but there are things like ABLE accounts and special needs trust. So at the end of a person's life, the person with a disability, any assets that are left in those kinds of vehicles, a special needs trust or an ABLE account, those would go back to pay MA for the services that they use during their lifetime.
Right. And a key, I think, again, I'm not an attorney, but to diverge your assets 6 or 8 years before you think you might need care and assistance to others, family members, whatever. And so that would protect assets as well. So.
Okay. We're over time a couple of minutes. We have about 10 more questions here. Would you want
That's
to?
fine. I have all night. So.
Okay. How much through this entire process do they help you with? I'm not sure exactly. This was at 7:30. I'm not sure
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I'll help you. I'm here. I'm here to provide information to people, no matter what county you're in. I'd help you in other counties too. Certain counties have navigators as well, so you can ask for that assistance if you need that. And the key is to gather information, learn from other parents, get on Facebook groups with other parents who have been there before. Maybe their children are a little older than you, and so you can learn from them, and then you can teach others that come along that you learn from yourself.
And also we help people all the time navigate TEFRA and getting services. So
Yeah.
okay. You can call us. Somebody just wrote a comment. You can also qualify for MA for your kids, even if the adults in the house don't qualify. Another comment, we are putting together the TEFRA supplement for MA. How does the SMRT process get triggered? Do we have to make a separate call to the state for that? We are in Ramsey County.
Yeah, you don't call, sorry, you don't call the state. You work through the county case manager, the county contact, whoever you're working with, if it's their front door, their intake. They have to initiate the process to the state. We don't call the state directly.
Mhm. Is there such a thing as asking to be SMRTed with TEFRA? I was told if we were to request that when we needed our next SMRT assessment, we would not need to submit as much of the financial information annually.
I'm not sure. I guess if you've got the information, it will be worth a shot to see if you can streamline things a bit.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. Is there a comprehensive list of items that could potentially be covered under the waivers? Obviously dependent on the individual needs, but still would be helpful. I know there's a list. If you Google each waiver individually, there's a list of what it covers, and they are different. They're not exactly the same, but when I guess I should say when Waiver Reimagine goes into existence, the idea was to sort of level the playing field and equalize all the waivers. So the two types of waivers that would be available in the future, 2026 was the last I heard, that it would be for people who are being taken care of in their homes versus people being taken care of outside their homes. And so then it would be basically two lists, which might, I don't know if that answers the question or helps, but
Yeah. The key is items that need to be related to the person's disability, that support the barriers that exist, that meet the need versus exceed the need, that are cost effective. How's that? So it's hard to generate a list because you could say fence, but I might have a 12-year-old that is taking driver's ed, or 14-year-old that's taking driver's ed. I don't need a fence, but just because it's on the list doesn't mean it's approvable. It might be allowable, but it's not approvable in my situation. But it would be approvable if I had a 12-year-old that ran into the street all the time, because 12-year-olds are supposed to be cognizant of traffic. So it's a tough list to generate. Hennepin is trying not to generate lists because it's not about, it's on the list. I get it. It's about what's your situation, what's your assessed need. So
okay. Similar question, are all these waiver services available for all the programs?
the waiver services are available if they're on the list through the Disability Services Program Manual. Providers may or may not be available. So, there's a staffing crisis right now, and so you might have a budget of $40,000, but if you can't find staff, it's hard. And so you have to look at alternative ways to recruit and find good staff.
Okay. My autistic child has MA and pending SSI assessment, also pending Min Choices assessment. All of these have been pending for 5 months. Can I get these waiver services through MA while I'm waiting?
They have to be certified disabled, so you need to be open to
Yeah,
Social Security or certified disabled through the state process.
No question. Just wanted to say a huge thank you for this webinar. Very helpful, and for doing it when you're not feeling 100%.
Thank
Hope your
you.
cough gets better very
I know.
soon.
Thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Thank you. This is so good. My county is telling me we don't qualify for a DD waiver till closer to 4 years due to ADL needs. A toddler needs a lot of cares.
It's a common focus where the older you get, the more divergent it is, the easier it is to tell if they need supports outside of their age. So if your 1-year-old, a 1-year-old needs a lot of care and assistance and supervision. So we can't have staff provide support to a 1-year-old because the parent should be providing all that staff, parental responsibility. When you're 4, it's getting closer. When you're 5, you can do a better assessment about what is related to the disability and what is related to the age of the child. It just gets easier as they get older, but harder when they're younger.
Yeah. And I think too that parents are expected to take care of their 1-year-olds. And so, that's where the disparity comes in. Let's see. I spoke with my child's social worker today, and she said that Min Choices assessment is still looking at cases from last January. This was how I was explained how long to expect the Min Choices assessment process is taking. Does that sound true? I guess it depends
That's
on what county you're in.
out of compliance. It's a tough situation. I can't imagine. So last January, so they're 2 months behind because we're in February, March now.
I don't know. They might have I took that to mean 14 months, but
Yeah, 14 months, you need to appeal and ask for some outside relief because that's just
yeah, not
too long.
okay. Yep. Mhm. Thank you. Very helpful. This was super helpful. Thank you. Yes, amazing information. Thank you. And that winds it up.
All right, thank you
So,
so much, everybody, and for hanging out there.
yeah, thank you, Jerry. This was
Thank you, Linda.
excellent and
Appreciate
really
it.
well done. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for coming. And don't forget to fill out the survey. We need this information to be able to apply for grants and to continue to provide programs like this. So we really appreciate your feedback, and thank you all for taking the time to come tonight, and have a good evening.
So,
All right,
thank you.
thank
Bye-bye.
you, both of you. With that, I'll end tonight's webinar.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. I'm sorry I didn't thank you
Yeah, thanks,
directly.
Dave.